Well, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel where we are looking at using Pytest or testing Django and Django REST framework projects using the default Django test cases, but now is the high time that we transition to actually Pytest, and this is what the series is about. But so far we've been using the default Django test cases from django.test, and we've been importing this class that we've been passing to our test model student. But now the major question becomes, why do we need another package, in this case Pytest, to do our testing? Why not stick to the default Django, what Django gives out of the box? I've prepared a short presentation here just to explain as to why we need Pytest. So as of now, we are using the Django unit test, and one of the irritating things, and this is my own perspective here, is that for everything that we've been testing, you must be able to cram or memorize either one or most of these assertions. Whether if you want to see if two things match, you either use assert equal. If you want to test that two things are not equal, you must remember to use assert not equal. If you want to test a boolean, it's either assert true or assert false, and there's many more things that you need to memorize or use IntelliSense for you to understand. So for example, if I go back to the code, you'll find here, for example, in this first one we are asserting equal, and if I just type, for example, self.assert, there's all these functions that you need to understand or memorize what they do, so that whenever you try to test two things, you must know or have the experience to know which assertion statement to select. And that's usually a huge turn off, especially for newcomers into programming, to memorize all of them. Okay, so the advantages that Pytest bring to the table is Pytest in itself is a framework that is built on top of the unit test, because what Django does is a direct it's forked from the Python unit test and just made to play well with Django. But Pytest in itself is a framework. Instead of cramming all of this, you only need to learn one word, which is assert, and this makes our test much more intuitive, and we are going to see with examples in the course of this video. So, and here you write your own comparisons and you just use the assert statement. That makes life work easier. So the other advantage with Pytest is that we are able to write integration tests and not just unit tests, and that's what just Django gives out of the box. It's intuitive, and perhaps one of the biggest advantages is plugins. There's a lot of plugins that Pytest have, and we'll be looking at a couple of them in the course of these tutorials, and plugins make our lives much easier and it makes testing way cool. Another thing we'll be able to do with Pytest is code coverage, in which we'll be able to calculate or get how many lines of code we've actually covered with our tests, and also be able to visualize the lines of code that we've not been able to cover with our tests. Pytest makes it easier to integrate with IDEs. In this case, we'll be using VS Code, and in the next video or after that, we'll be looking at how we can be able to integrate our test to our IDEs and also be able to do test discovery, and Pytest makes that way easy. With Pytest, we're also able to run either single test or isolate tests. By that, what I mean is that if you come to our code, for example, we can be able to run just this code block on itself and ignore the rest. So that's another strategic advantage of Pytest. We're also able to do parallel testing. That means we can be able to run, let's say, 5 or 6 tests at the same time. And this, what effectively does is enable us to run our tests much faster than the traditional Django unit test, which we are only able to do one test at a time. With Pytest, we're also able to do better integration with continuous integration and continuous delivery systems, whether it's Travis or whether you are using Jenkins. And in this specific tutorial series, towards the end, we'll be looking at GitHub Actions, and that is how we can be able to run our tests on GitHub once we push our code live. And perhaps the most overlooked importance of PyTest is that it does not replace, we are able to still run the traditional Django test. So even if you've written old tests using the default Django test cases, with PyTest is still able to discover and run those tests. So think of PyTest also as a test runner, similar to what Jest is for JavaScript. Okay, without further ado, let's jump straight to the setup. So to install PyTest for Django, we install pip install PyTest, and we also need to install Pytest Django. And Pytest Django is what is going to help us bind Pytest into the Django project. So let those ones installed. Second. Okay, those ones have installed. And after that, now if I come here and say, instead of saying, traditionally we are running python manage.py, we are saying test, and we can see here that all the 6 tests run. Now in order for us to test, we just say pytest, and this is another easier way of integrating. So here it's going to tell us collected 0 items. Remember, we said one of the advantages of PyTest is test discovery, and it is telling us no tests have been run. This is because we need to configure PyTest in order to discover our tests and actually run them. So the way we do that is we come here and create a new file, and it's called, I'm going to save it, and it's usually called pytest.ini file. Save that, and this is okay, it's saved in the wrong place, need to copy it outside, move, just a second. Yes, this file needs to be at the root of your project, and the pytest.ini, and you can call it either setup.cfg or pytest.ini. I like calling it pytest.ini, makes it life work easier. So, and the way we do this, we open our brackets and we call this pytest, like so. And we need to tell PyTest where our Django root is, or where our settings is. So we say Django testing, no, Django settings module, and we need to give it the path. In this case, our settings are in, let's see, they're in school local settings. So I'm going to say school dot, actually let for this one we can either use local settings. Let me see what this is. Okay, or we can use school.settings. It depends on whether you followed our first tutorial. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to use local settings. And remember, we said this is the file we'll be using for testing purposes. Okay, I'm going to save that. So literally we are telling it where the settings are. Another setting that is important to do is, and it's completely optional, so I'm going to say optional but recommended, is that we need to tell PyTest, I'm going to write Python files, we need to tell it the format or the naming configuration of all our testing file. So we are going to tell it to look at test.py space. We are also going to say test underscore that.py, and this we are telling it to look for all the files that start with the word test underscore with a name, then run that. And this is the format that we'll most probably be using for the rest of the tutorial, and that's my preference. Or look also for files that start with a name, then underscore test.py. Okay, so if I do that, then I can come here and run PyTest. Okay, database password not found. Okay, let me just use settings. Yeah. Okay. The reason it was throwing that error is because it's saying in this local settings we need a database password. So it means in our database here, config database password, it's not being able to identify that in our env file. So I don't know where I've written my env file. Okay, oops, I had renamed my env file. So allow me for a second just to return that file. Sorry for that. .env, and I'm going to copy from my, this needs to be at the root. I don't know why it keeps doing that. I need to copy from my env sample, so I'm going to edit this out. Okay, like so. And here I'm going to put my password. Cancel that. So I can return this to the local settings. Now let me try to run Pytest again. Saying no module named psychopg2. Let's try to install this. So I've installed the psychopg2. It seems the package, because we need a database connection. So again, I'm going to run pytest. Collected 6 items, and you can see it's showing us the dots, everything has passed, and it's giving us a nice 100% here, and it's telling us 6 tests have passed, and this is the time it has taken. Cool. So this is just a normal setup. So but we can add more to this. So one of the other additional commands that we can run, for example, is it's looking at I can say pytest dash verbose. Let's see what this does. Oops. Let's see is dash v, if that one is going to work. And so if I run pytest dash v, what it's going to do is give us verbose outputs. Before it only gave us the 6 dots, but now it's actually telling us that inside classroom there's a file called test.py, that is a class, and this is the actual test, and it has passed. So actually, just to show you how awesome Pytest is, I can come here and, for example, say this to be Tommy so that it can fail, and let's run this and see the kind of output it gives us compared to the traditional test. So it's going to give us an assertion error, and it's going to tell us Tom is not equals to Tommy. It was expecting Tom, but we give it Tommy, and it's going to give us plus plus, and this plus plus is directly below M and Y, and it means we've added these 2 digits and it's expecting Tom. So it's telling us that, hey, these are additional digits that are not supposed to be there. So if I removed that and put, let's say, T, again I expect it to fail, and it's going to show us expecting Tom, we've given it T, so we need these 2. So if I return it to Tom, then our test should run. So one of the things we do is that instead of writing this here, we can add it to the pytest.ini file, where we can, there's this variable called adopts with double P, like that, and we can say -v. Another thing I like adding is this no migrations word, and that means I'm telling Pytest whenever we run, especially testing the models, don't do Django what is it called, there's a command which is python manage.py make migrations. I'm telling it don't bother doing the migrations. So there's that. Another thing we can do here is -ignore, and I can say for now ignore the VNV folder. I don't want it to come and look inside this folder, the VNV, because that's where our packages and our environment is, so there's no point of looking at that. And there's also many other things that we can skip, for example the test file, but I'll show you another way of skipping those files in some of the tutorials that are supposed to come. So clear, let me clear the terminal, just make sure everything works. So when I do pytest, I don't have to do -v. Wait. I'm not sure if ignore is supposed to have error pytest options ignore. So I don't know if it's --ignore or is just ignore. Let me retry this. Okay, so yeah, I needed to do -- and everything now works without retyping this every time you run pytest. Okay, cool. Now we've seen that pytest is now able to run the traditional functions that are generated by Django. But again, we said one of the things that we want to utilize is so that we can convert all of these to assert statement, which makes our project quite easy to read. So instead of this, I'm just going to say assert c is equals to 3, and now I can say pytest and run this, and it should work. Again, it has worked. So here I want to assert that I'm just going to copy that, and I say assert is equals to Tom. Again, this is very, very intuitive. Again, I can just copy this and assert that is equals to Tom. Okay, and I need to cancel that, and this needs to be double. Okay, that is okay, that is okay. And again, we can continue doing this for the rest of our tests so that they are cleaner. Here I'm going to say assert. And I hope, guys, you can see why assert is quite an easier one to use. That means you can do all the crazy things you want. For example, you can come here and do a query set and do all the modeling you want here, or custom functions that you want to write, and just do a simple assert. This needs to be a double. Again, similarly to this, just copy this, paste it here. This needs to be pass. I need to cancel that one out. I need to cancel this one out. I need to copy this and make sure this is okay. Now if I clear my terminal and run pytest, all tests should run correctly and all passing 100%. So what you're seeing here, 83%, it means it's code coverage, and we are going to do that in the next video. So let me just expand this so it's clear. So everything seems okay. So we've just done a simple assert statement, which is much more intuitive for people to use. And in the next one, remember this one we are just using the default Django test cases. In the next one, in the next video, we are going actually to see how we can now set up actual Pytest test classes without this test case, and now we can go around about that. We are also going to look at code coverage plus other awesome plugins, and we're also going to come back to our models and now actually start testing the classroom class. So I hope this video has been informative. We are going to build up on this and look at more plugins, and I look to see you in the next video. Kindly subscribe and also leave the comment below, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.